Tervitan enda poolt, mina olen Linda Lainvoo.
I am Linda Lainvoo and will be the moderator of the second panel. And I'm really glad that Estonia hosts such a conference today, and we have here a distinguished audience, both present and online. The first panel was very interesting, so I think we are going to have 2 very interesting days. To cut the long story short, we continue with our panels. The topic of the first one, cultural objects as potential targets, who are responsible and how to protect. And it's my pleasure to give the floor to Krista Pikkat. And she will give us a UNESCO insight to our topic. Krista is the director of the UNESCO Culture and Emergencies entity.
Tere.
Good morning, good afternoon.
And I'd like to start by thanking the ICOM Estonia for the invitation. It's such a pleasure for me personally to be in Tartu, which is a town of my alma mater. And of course, I'm also privileged to be able to listen to such a wide range of presentations from different actors in the field of cultural heritage protection, including as concerns illicit trafficking. As was said, I'm the director of the department at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris, which covers actually UNESCO's operational activities in countries in emergencies and the cultural heritage protection in countries like Yemen, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Lebanon, etc., etc. But we also cover UNESCO culture conventions. And this is where I would like to start by just showing the body of the normative framework that UNESCO has developed as a UN culture organization since UNESCO was established. So the first UNESCO Culture Convention dates back to 1954. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Convention on the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict. Then the second one concerns 1970 Convention on Illicit Trafficking. And then, of course, the World Heritage Convention and Underwater Cultural Heritage Convention, Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention, and the 2005 Cultural Diversity Convention. But we also have a recommendation concerning the protection and promotion of museums and collections, which perhaps is less known. Today, I would like to focus on the 1970 Convention, which concerns illicit trafficking. Yet, I actually also am responsible for 1954 and 2001 conventions, as well as the museum's recommendation. The 1970 Convention has seen an increase in the number of ratifications, and we now have 149 countries in the world that have ratified the convention. As you know, like all conventions, this is not a retroactive convention, so it means that the convention comes into force in a country when it is ratified. And of course, then we have the biggest part of the human history before 1970 convention that is not covered by the convention. But UNESCO has also set up a committee for return and restitution. Its abbreviation is ICP-RCP. And this committee also meets regularly and handles cases that fall outside of the 1970 convention. There, as you see on the slide, we have indicated the countries that have ratified the convention with covering them with green, and then the red spots are those countries that have not ratified the convention. And of course, perhaps one of the first messages I would like to convey is that the convention is as strong as its ratification. So we always aspire for universal ratification, because as long as there are countries that have not ratified the convention, it means that there are also loopholes, and we don't have necessarily as strong measures in place as there should be. And the convention stands on three pillars: preventive measures, restitution, and international cooperation. So here are some of the preventive measures that we can think of, starting, of course, national laws. The conventions always have to be translated into national laws in order for them to actually gain meaning in a specific context. And then there are, of course, the convention also promotes different types of measures and mechanisms, and UNESCO works in different areas so as to promote the implementation of the convention. I already mentioned that one of the main aspects, of course, is the whole question about return and restitution of cultural property. And we see that whereas the Return and Restitution Committee was set up at UNESCO in 1978, over the recent years, we really see that the countries in Latin America and Africa, former colonies, are increasingly vocal about the request for the artifacts to be returned. And it has become a question of access to cultural goods, so it's about cultural rights. And UNESCO organizes global meetings of ministers of culture. We had the first one in 2022 in Mexico, and last year in Barcelona. And already in these declarations at the ministerial level, countries commit to the return of cultural artifacts as a question of right. UNESCO's convention covers, of course, the return and restitution of cultural objects. I'm now speaking about the 1970 convention, but I just wanted to also recognize that our convention is not the only one. There's also, as you know, in 1995, UNIDROIT Convention and the Nicosia Convention. So all these different legal frameworks are complementary. But what is important also to recognize is that we recognize that it's a multinational crime that becomes more and more complex. We see that it's moving also now online. It has already been acknowledged by the previous speakers. And in order for us to really put in place measures to protect heritage, we need to act in partnership with a wide range of different international actors, but also it's the same for the national level implementation. And that's why I'm very happy to also see the customs and law enforcement agencies represented at the conference today. So the international cooperation, as I said, covers all the aspects related to the work on the fight against illicit trafficking, starting from protection and prevention to investigation, prosecution, and then, of course, return and restitution. And perhaps also worth mentioning is that we have come to realize how important it is that when we organize trainings for stakeholders at the national or regional levels, that it's important that we bring the different stakeholders together. So now UNESCO's practice is to mostly organize regional level trainings so that we also nurture these contacts across borders. But also we want to have cultural heritage experts speak to customs and law enforcement and judiciary in order for them to also better understand how they can work together. Now a couple of words about UNESCO's frameworks and tools that we have developed, and I think that the previous speakers have already mentioned some of them. I would want to start with the database of national cultural heritage laws that UNESCO set up and that we are presently actually revamping and trying to make it more easily understandable and usable, also by non-legal background professionals. As you see, there are presently over 3,000 legal texts that have been uploaded on the UNESCO database from 179 member states. And the idea is that any professional who needs to verify the legality of the import or export or transfer of ownership of cultural property can do that by then verifying their specific national law in force at the time of the action. We have also developed model provisions for the implementation of the convention. Model provisions are, I would say, it's an attempt to accompany countries to actually translate UNESCO's convention into the national heritage laws. So they should facilitate the integration and the strengthening of national heritage laws. The publication in the middle is actually an outcome of a EU project that we implemented and that allowed us to develop a toolkit for European judiciary and law enforcement agencies. And this contains, I believe, valuable examples of best practices. And of course, we are very happy to see that Eesti Muinsuskaitseamet has also translated some of UNESCO publications into Estonian, which I think has just been published or is about to be published. Previous speakers also spoke about art market. This is perhaps one of the most challenging areas of work for us because UNESCO has developed a code of ethics for art market dealers in 1999. And art market dealers never really took ownership of that, but it was also a little bit outdated, we felt. So for the past 6 years now, we have been working on the revision of the code of ethics. And it has been quite challenging at times, already to sensitize the art market to the fact that illicit trafficking exists, that it's organized crime, and that it's very often also very much linked to other types of organized crime. Of course, our aim here is to fully recognize that legal trade exists, yet make sure that the legal trade also plays their role in the fight against illicit trafficking. So this new code of ethics that we have developed is a result of a very long consultation that finally we managed to have a consensus text between our member states and the art market dealers now. And in May, we will have our meetings of the Convention and the Return and Restitution Committee, and this will be now submitted to the Return and Restitution Committee and hopefully endorsed. And then the idea is that art market dealers can actually pledge their adherence to the code. So they can apply for the use of UNESCO's name and logo in a way, because they would be allowed, those who comply with the Code of Ethics, they will be allowed to use a reference I adhered to UNESCO's code, and we hope that this will also be a good carrot for us to attract more adherence among art market dealers. And promote responsible art market. One of the important aspects of our work, besides legal work and capacity building, of course, is awareness raising, because we understand that as citizens, we all have a role to play. And that's why we developed a social media toolkit, but also an awareness-raising campaign that we started in Latin America on the margins of G20 meetings in Brazil, but other countries too. And now finally we are happy that the European Union agreed to partner with us. And we have started the launch of the campaign also in some European countries. The first one was Cyprus, and I'm very hopeful that the other countries will follow suit. We also actually have already a positive answer from Spain, I hope also from Estonia and other Baltic countries. And the idea is, of course, to, with very straightforward and simple messages. Here, the poster that you see, Protect Our Common Heritage, is actually an image of a suitcase. And the idea is to replace the content, the artifacts that you see in the suitcase, always with a kind of typical artifact that you can find in the given country. And we have managed to display this campaign at airports, but also sometimes in the streets, as you see here. So a very easily usable tool, but hopefully impactful. So one of the challenging areas, another challenging area, I should say, is also, of course, the fact that we see that trafficking and illicit trafficking has moved online. You see here a little bit of a historic of UNESCO's action in this regard, starting from 2006. But it's only last year that we convened at Paris, at the UNESCO headquarters, the first international meeting on online trafficking. And this was an interesting exercise because we saw how difficult, again, it was for us to engage the online platforms in the discussions. I think in principle everybody agrees that cultural heritage is as, I don't know, Louis Vuitton brand bags that shouldn't be trafficked, yet so much more energy and tools are developed for the brands and the sort of counterfeit fight in comparison to cultural heritage. So I think that it's an area where we really need to also work together with AI and see how we can use the tool to feed this information and make it also more easy to spot. But we, of course, we very much wish to continue the work with the online platforms, not online traffickers, online platforms, and possibly also see whether we can come up with a kind of code of ethics or to sort of help them also set standards and share best practices. And here's another toolbox that we oh, that was quick. That we developed, so you can actually consult all these publications that were done in follow-up to the conference that we organized. You can consult them online. As has been said, cultural heritage becomes especially vulnerable in times of emergencies. It, of course, particularly concerns archaeological heritage. We have had reports, for instance, in Afghanistan, where satellite images see activity in 300 different regions, only in North Afghanistan. And that's why, of course, UNESCO has also made efforts to focus on those countries that are in conflict or have come out of natural hazards, and we communicate these alerts internationally, and of course we work with ICOM using the red lists of ICOM but also other partners. And the last slide concerns the UNESCO Virtual Museum of Stolen Cultural Objects that also was already mentioned. So this is a tool that we are really proud of, that was launched last year at Mondiacult conference in Barcelona. And the idea is to create 3D images of those artifacts that have been included in the Interpol database of stolen artifacts. Very often, the information that we have about these objects is quite limited. Sometimes it's only a very small black and white photo. So here we work with digital companies and AI to recreate the images, 3D images. And I really invite you to visit this site. It's you can actually consult it on your mobile. So it's very young people friendly. And the idea is to actually empty the museum one day. For the time being, we have artifacts from 50 countries, 250 artifacts, and you can actually comprise your own collections if you want. You can, and what is also important, I think, because there was a discussion about the value of objects, and that's why we decided to actually link these objects always with stories, narration from the communities where they come from, so as to, in addition to these value that they can have as objects of beauty or I don't know, value in terms of whether it's gold or something else, we wanted to link them back to their communities and actually show that beyond this monetary value, these objects actually have a sacred, cultural, historic value. They represent who we are. They represent the identity of the communities where they come from, and this is why they are important, and this is why it's also about cultural rights. The virtual museum has also a return and restitution room. this is another attempt to actually de-dramatize the return of the objects, because very often European museums, which have very rich collections coming from all over the world, there is a worry that if they start returning, those objects that do not have good provenance, that they will empty the museums. But what we have seen is that these returns, when they are successful, it's always a win-win, because the objects actually gain the real value, they get much more significance, and then the museum has a story to tell, and they have, much more. The information becomes much more rich about the objects that they still have at the museum. So I think my time is up. I will stop here, and I thank you very much for your attention. Of course, if you have questions, I'm happy to try to respond. Thank you.
So, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Krista. And for the information, I was thinking of moderating in the language that the presenter presented. However, with Krista, we decided that it's kind of weird that two Estonians speak English in front of you. So therefore, the questions will be in Estonian.
So first of all, I have many questions. I hope I can at least leave some time for the others here to ask their questions. I have collaborated within the context of UNESCO, also collaborated with the ICROM, other organizations related to UNESCO. And globally, I can say that I will try to slow down as a speaker. I've seen that when I look at where the countries are at, which point they're at, then it varies tremendously. So UNESCO bears this very complex role. I have worked on the database, including all these regulations. So it has this very complex role to kind of find a solution, like one size fits all, to come up with a model like that. What do you do in order to be comprehensible and universal for everybody? That is a very difficult question. I think that it is like a blessing as well as a curse of UNESCO. That on the one hand, it's very nice that we have global coverage and that we have an overview of what is going on in the world generally. We once again started organizing meetings for ministers of culture, and for that we also published a report. This report includes data we receive from countries who are accountable for how they implement the UNESCO conventions. So this provides us with a snapshot of what is going on in the world, what the situation is like, and which are the biggest problems in the field of culture. I think that this is one of UNESCO's main goals as well, to be very well aware of what is going on. But there are most certainly regional differences. We talked about the return of cultural property. This is a very topical issue in Latin America, now also becoming more and more prominent in Africa. So there are certain topics, certain issues that are related more to one or another region. Fortunately, UNESCO has its representations in different parts of the world, so we also work via these representations. They try to understand the specificities of their regions, even their country. And then there are these general global questions, which we have to be picked out of all these topics. So we have to pick out those topics, those fields that are more important for us, and that we also have to then start consulting about on a regional level, on a state level. Thank you. I agree that it's a complex task. It was very interesting to listen to how you technically approach this. Since I still have the microphone, I will continue with a follow-up question. We have been talking a lot about problems on various levels. Problems regarding the illicit trafficking in cultural property. Maybe a somewhat provocative question. I will actually ask this question from all the panelists. I can give you a hint about that already. What do you think? Which is the biggest weakness? Where is this system letting us down, letting the heritage down? There are many links here, but can you point out something like the weakest link? And generally, when protecting cultural property, well, we think that it comes down to preparation. Ukraine was a very remarkable example here, referring to the fact that we are not prepared. That it seems as if we have the documentation, we have the inventories. So it seems as if everybody knows and is aware, but nevertheless it seems to me as this Europe was somewhat like hibernating. And we're hoping that wars and natural catastrophes occur somewhere else. So I think that in this regard, the war in Ukraine was like a wake-up call. Over the past couple of years, we have seen Europe waking up and starting to think, maybe also carrying out these trainings or drills so that we are already communicating better with each other, not just between scientists or researchers, but we're already considering that maybe we should also involve customs, the prosecutor's office. So I think that the level of awareness has been on the rise. So yes, I think that this preparedness is something that we need, and we shouldn't only just focus on the legal documents. We should also see what kind of mechanisms we have in place, how we can protect, what do we have in place. We should also carry out, like I said, these trainings or drills, so that if something hits us, we know where to run, what to take with us, what are our priorities also in these collections, where to evacuate, what to evacuate, and so on. So that the cultural sector somehow, for me, seems to be living in an isolated manner, that it is not taken so seriously. And once again, Ukraine here is a good example in that sense, that, let's say, at the level of the UN, we say that, well, UNESCO is culture, education, research, it's like, it's not so important, but the Ukrainians during their war have already said that it is a war of culture taking place. So I believe that this also has helped for people to understand that culture is who we are. This is our identity, and it affects us more than anything else. And therefore the dialogue between the cultural sector and other more serious sectors, like the sector of defense, or I don't know, some other important sectors, that this dialogue has now also shifted a bit, and that they are starting to involve culture in various conversations when we're discussing the level of preparedness. Thank you. And as I promised, I will now offer this microphone to whoever wishes to ask a question here in the audience. So Alexandra, thank you for your presentation. I would like to know whether when the UNESCO conventions are based on countries' legislation, and we know that the countries are the ones who have to implement it. But we know that it is not always observed. We know that it's not just the illegal organizations who do not follow these regulations, but also the countries themselves. Does UNESCO have some kind of means to force the countries to abide by the law, by the rules? We know that according to this convention from 1970, Russia has taken out a lot of cultural property from Ukraine. We know that if Russia has acceded to a convention, then what would be the next steps after they behave like this? It is a very good question. UNESCO is a relatively small organization. So our means of putting pressure on parties is, yes, the conventions, the legal documents, and trying to bring parties or countries together. But yes, we have no police force, no army, who would be able to actually protect cultural property. So this responsibility lies within these member states. The secretariat there is at the service of the member countries, so all the decisions also involve the member countries. The interpreters cannot hear the questions which are asked without the microphone. Well, we're talking about member countries, then we're talking about UN membership, so this is even beyond the grasp of UNESCO. But what I want to say is that in principle, that the organizations of the United Nations are organizations of the member countries. The fact that the decisions are taken based on a consensus as a rule, although the most recent decision on Ukraine in the UNESCO was taken in the form of voting, unfortunately. So these are all very complex questions, but what I can say is that the destruction, when we're discussing the destruction of cultural property, then now there have already been 2 occasions where the destruction of cultural property, I don't know, I can't find the words in Estonian, but says the speaker, yes, the International Criminal Court considers it as a war crime twice already. The first time for Dubrovnik, and then the Tombouctou cultural property, which was destroyed by Daesh. So these are already, this is another set of bodies. So UNESCO's task here is to document it, and we of course share these documents with the committees that are set up to follow through with the necessary proceedings. Thank you. Time is up. Thank you so much, Krista. Let's give a round of applause to Krista. And now, as for the next speaker, I hope we have a connection via the web with Alfio Gullotta.
Hello, Alfio. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. So I will give you a quick intro. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Alfio is, as you can see, a policy officer, and as I have the information, his focus is on cultural heritage and civil-military cooperation. Am I correct? Thank you. And he is from the European External Action Services. So, Alfio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the possibility to be here. Apologies for not being in presence, but I will try to give a short overview of what the European Union work is in the field of cultural heritage in conflict and crisis, specifically with an angle also on countering trafficking of cultural property. It's not easy to go after Krista, and I will try to complement what she said and what the other speakers have said, because this is indeed something very important and on which the European Union is working, and it's indeed something that it's inherently transnational. So let's see. I hope the presentation moved. The European Union created in 2021 a set of policies to work on cultural heritage in conflict and crisis. it was a response to what happened in the Middle East, the destruction brought forward by Daesh, and how cultural heritage trafficking entered the stage as a problem also related to funding of terrorism activities in some events, and this necessity to create a policy doesn't mean that the European Union didn't work before 2021 in cultural heritage protection. The European Union included thinking about cultural heritage protection since 2001, but 2021 signed a different approach and a more structured and complex way to work on cultural heritage, specifically in the external action. While the framework of this policy is mainly, of course, on protecting cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible in case of conflict or crisis, one of the most relevant aspects, of course, is countering trafficking of cultural property. But specifically regarding this, in 2022, another policy was released, the European Union Action Plan on Countering Against Trafficking in Cultural Goods. That was later on in 2023 followed by a Council conclusion. Now, to give you an idea, those policies are mainly Commission or EAS document, but if you have Council conclusion on them, you have the backing of the European government, the European Council. So they are not mandatory for member states to adhere, but they give the direction in which the actions of the European Union has to go. And countering trafficking of cultural property is one of the actions in which the member state has to work on. Why? Because it's considered a threat, is considered a transnational threat, as I said in the beginning. The traffic of cultural property, as discussed by also the previous speaker, is inherently something that goes beyond border for a series of reasons that I'll try to analyze a little more in detail during my presentation. I am a law enforcement officer. I am a Carabinieri officer from the Carabinieri Command for Protection of Cultural Heritage, and I've been working for the European Union since 2022, specifically on this. And the experience that I've gained goes exactly in that direction. It doesn't make any sense to try and counter this phenomenon only on a national basis. Of course, you need national legislation, but you need to adhere to the international framework of convention that has been introduced by the previous speakers, that give a series of indications to countries, also member of the European Union, on what is necessary to do and what is better to do in order to address this inherently transnational problem. There are also other policies. For instance, in 2025, the European Union released the European Union Preparedness Union Strategy, in which, again, cultural heritage is identified among the sector important for societal resilience, and also among the areas in which, in the framework of the European Union civil protection, there is the necessity to work also abroad. Basically now cultural heritage protection is among the tool related to the civil union, the European Union civil protection mechanism. So already 2 member states submitted the possibility to have specialized team working on heritage protection, and therefore heritage protection has become one of the areas in which the European Union Civil Protection Mechanism can intervene with specific teams from European Union member states or other third country member states that are included in the EU PCM. And finally, in 2025, November 2025, the Culture Compass of the European Union was adopted. It is so far the more encompassing policy of the European Union on culture. Again, threats to cultural heritage, illegal excavation, looting, forgery were considered as something that existed that needs to be addressed, but also, and this is something that is really specific to what's happening now in Ukraine with the unjustified aggression by the Russian Federation. Culture is being politicized and used as a mean for strategic warfare. Therefore, again, protection of cultural heritage becomes a strategic mean of supporting Ukraine in its fight for survival. How? Why the European Union includes working on cultural heritage in its external action? Because cultural heritage is considered a symbolic component of conflict and crisis as a driver of conflict, but also a vector of peace and development. So there is this dualism. Cultural heritage can be exploited in war, can be used as a tool for warfare, can be a victim of war, but it's also something that can be used for peacemaking, that support development, that support peace. How the European Union work on cultural heritage, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. The framework exists. The International Convention gives a series of indications. What these concepts do is basically align the capability of the European Union and the tool that the European Union has developed to work in its external action in a way that it's suitable to work on cultural heritage protection through preventive action, safeguarding measure, and recovery processes. It was already said, preventive action. Prevention is at the core of heritage protection for a series of reasons. And that is very important, that it's also the most overlooked of the factors, because, of course, it's easier to prevent, but especially in case of emergency, we tend to think about reacting, because it's more justifiable from a certain point of view. It's difficult to justify money spending, unfortunately, on prevention. But what we have seen in many cases, and one of them is again Ukraine, and as Krista said, Ukraine is a main signer of all the main convention, was ideally technically prepared to what's happening, but nobody is really prepared when it comes to crisis and conflict. So in the end, many issues now are relevant. One specifically thinking about nobody's really ready. In the case of the Kherson museum looting, the inventories that were on paper were already taken with the items, and now there is a relevant problem of identification of missing items. That is something that, of course, it's necessary in order to try and retrieve. So inventories and data collection, cultural policies, preventive diplomacy, education, and fight against disinformation and preparedness measures need to be prepared, because something will happen. And when something happens, you need to be ready. You need to have emergency measures in place. You have to have refugees. You need to work on dialogue and mediation, fight against possible heritage crime, and have mitigation measures in place in order to try to diminish the impact of something that in the end was inevitable and cannot be avoided through preparation measures. And of course, then there is the recovery and reconstruction processes. And on these, we have a very long experience of cooperation, again, with UNESCO, that of course it's one of the main actor in this, on recovery and reconstruction, for instance, in Iraq, where it's not only the physical assets or the physical historical heritage that is being reconstructed, but is really the fabric of the society. Some cultural places embed within themselves really a deep connection with the local population, and giving them again the possibility to use them and to live in there, ease the pain of the events that the population has suffered, and can be used as a catalyst for reconciliation among perhaps different parties in struggle. The European Union monitor the work that it does on cultural heritage protection through an inter-service task force that is supposed to drive the efforts related to this work strand, and through progress report. 3 have been published. The 2025 report is ready and has been informally presented to member states. I'm waiting for the approval to make it public, and it shows all the activities that the European Union literally does with its tools related to cultural heritage on a global scale. These are the areas of the work in which the European Union has worked in 2024. There will be, it's similar to the one in which the European Union also has worked in 2025, and many projects are brought forward through local partners with the support of the European Union delegation. But we don't have to forget the missions, CSDP mission, Common Security and Defense Policy mission, which are the main tool of the European Union to work, especially on security and defense abroad. In 2024, 5 missions worked on cultural heritage protection. In 2025, 6 missions, UBAM Libya, has been added to the 6 mission. And it's really important because, of course, Libya, it's a place in which first, heritage is important for historical reason, as in any other place, but also for economic sustainability and for economic development, because in the past, heritage and cultural tourism was a big part of life in Libya, and we truly hope that it can be the same for the future. Regarding specifically the fight against trafficking in cultural property, as I said, in 2022, the Commission put forward the action plan that was adopted on 13 December and later on followed by Council conclusion. Long story short, this action plan has a dual approach. That again, it's reflected in what Krista said before, in reference to the guidelines for the art market that they are going to put forward, hopefully this year. Every illicit market has 2 aspects. Demand and offer. You cannot counter only one of them. You have to work both on the offer, so the criminal side that create an offer for something that shouldn't be for sale, and whoever it's on the other side is the recipient. That can be private collectors, or as being also museum, cultural institution, etc., especially when it comes to items that have questionable provenance. And to work on this, you have to work on awareness raising with the art market and with supporting the work of law enforcement. And I want to show you something from my previous experience as a Carabinieri officer working in investigation on cultural property crimes. Here you can see images from something that was looted on the ground. This is how an illegally excavated object appears. Thanks to the Carabinieri for allowing me to use this image. This is how an illegally excavated object appears, but also this is how an illegally excavated object appears. And it's exactly the same object, only here it's right after the excavation, illegally excavated. And here is how it is presented to be sold or to be exposed in a cultural institution, perhaps. And the problem with this kind of investigation is the need to understand how do we get from one side to the other? How do we get something that it's illegal, seem to be legal? And this is done via a very long series of passages that, as I said, are usually international, and that involves different actors, the creation of a forged provenance, the ability to give a history that looks real to something that has a very different history and that was illegally excavated or stolen. And this is money laundering. You're not laundering an item, you're not laundering money, but you're laundering an item, a cultural item. But it's money laundering nevertheless, because you have something that is illegal. And through a series of passages, you devise a way to hide this illegal origin and place it on the legal market. And there is where the money is made in this process. And this is what the European Union, with a series of projects and programs, is trying to address, because it's important to understand and to support law enforcement and to put them in contact, as I said, already mentioned specifically during this panel, with cultural experts, because law enforcement alone cannot connects all the dot, neither can cultural institution. And for instance, these were a series of programs and projects run through till 2025. Of course, there is the PRISM project, which you know very well. And there is also another program designed for Middle East and North Africa that started in March 2026, and that will try and can link different words, the words of culture and the word of law enforcement in the MEA region, and then create linkages with law enforcement in Europe in order to better exchange information, attacking the problem at the source, identifying the flow, and removing the less questionable, the more questionable items in the market. The point is, the idea is to go from spot initiative to a real integrated approach on countering trafficking of cultural property from the European Union. And to do that, the information is there. We need to not reinvent the wheel. We need to connect the dot. For instance, as the European Union mission in Ukraine has done between Europol and Caltanet, which are two existing European Union tools that work on countering trafficking on cultural property and the Ukrainian law enforcement. And by creating this link, it already strengthened countering trafficking on cultural property from Ukraine. And I think I have finished my time, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Alfio. Unfortunately, due to time constraint, I don't think we have an opportunity for questions, but thank you for being here. And I'm happy to introduce this panel's last speaker from ICOM Lithuania, Sigita Baugaržaitė-Talskienė.
Okay. So hello once again, and thank you very much for your time that you are here with us, and thank you for the host of this beautiful National Museum. Of course, to the colleagues, ICOM Estonia, we are together in this very useful and all us together brings Project Prism. So, I think it's just this one. Okay. Yeah, and a lot of beautiful and strong presentations we heard already. And of course, we all know that illicit trafficking in cultural property is a criminal activity directed against the common heritage of humanity, causing long-term and often irreversible damage of the world cultural legacy. This issue requires continuous and attention, especially in light of the dynamically changing geopolitical situation and the growing international challenges. Every day, cultural property is acquired throughout illegal means in various countries around the world and enters the illicit market. Over the past 3 decades, illegal trade in art and antiquities has become a significant international problem and transcends national borders. The consequences of illicit trafficking in cultural property are not limited to the loss of cultural heritage. As was mentioned before, this activity is often linked to organized crime, the shadow economy, and other illegal activities. This area frequently overlap and reinforce one another. For example, the shadow economy, so cultural property is often sold on the black market, bypassing taxes and legal regulation. This constitutes a significant part of the shadow economy. Cultural and historical losses, so illegal excavations, thieves from museums or religious sites destroy invaluable objects and separate them from their context, terribly erasing the history and cultural identity of nations. And of course, destructions and conflict zones. During the armed conflicts, the looting of cultural property became a tool used to weaken a state's identity and to finance military activities. The fight against this phenomenon is complicated by the growing of illegal online trade, as was mentioned before also, which creates favorable conditions for anonymity and makes control and law enforcement mechanism less effective. The exploitation of the internet for illegal activities requires a resistment and updating of conventions and ethical standards, such as 1970 UNESCO Convention was presented before, as well as the UNESCO International Code of Ethics for the Dealers in Cultural Property. There was a privilege to work with this, so yeah, it's... the states affected by armed conflicts are particularly vulnerable, as cultural property in these regions becomes an easy target for illegal appropriation and trafficking. For example, the cultural heritage of Ukraine, which is currently under the attack. This map was presented by the Dr. Michael Dela Cruz, director of the Operations Secretariat Blue Shield International, clearly illustrate the traceable routes of the illicit export of cultural property. And of course, Lithuanian geographical position between East and West determined the transit of cultural property throughout its territory. Therefore, it is particularly important to strengthen the dissemination of information, competencies, and practical skills needed to identify potential illicit trade in art objects in a timely manner. Effectively, prevention, prompt response, of course, and institutional as well as international cooperation are essential conditions for preventing illegal activities and ensuring the return of cultural properties to its rightful owners. So that's why having received an invitations to join this international PRISM project. So for this is especially thank you for the Sophie Delapierre, she will come later. Yeah, the board of ICOM Lithuania began considering which measure could most effectively strengthen the field of combating the illicit trafficking in art objects. And recognizing that in Lithuania, relatively little attention is paid to the issue of illegal trade in art, and observing that an increasing number of young professionals coming to museums each year. So we decided that it would be useful, and this time to offer museums a set of guidelines and helpful references. Of course, these publications will serve not only for the museum professionals, but also for the specialists in other fields who encounter illicit trafficking in art objects. First of all, we would like to create an accessible guide for all museums on illegal cultural heritage trade and prevention. This guide is relevant for national, state, municipal, and smaller museums, and the project will involve collaboration with cultural heritage law lawyers, cultural heritage specialists, and museologists to prepare and analyze the investigation frameworks. The project aims to create a handbook for museum, available digital and print formats, and covering topics such as identifying and addressing illegal cultural heritage trade, notifying responsible institutions, purchasing values to prevent illegal trade, and steps to take if a museum suspects it has illegally sold items in its collections. The publications will address key issues such as the way, in which cultural property becomes an object of the illicit market, the main categories of illegally trade cultural and natural objects, and differences between them. It will present international and Lithuanian legal acts regulating the movement of cultural properties between states, the procedures for the export and import of antiquities, as well as the mechanism for tracing and returning illegally exported objects. Of course, finds discovered using the metal detectors and auto search equipment along with their legal status are discussed separately because the same problem we have and have to deal with this. So I'm quick. So what we have did, we already done format group for researchers who defined the core text of the book and manuscripts. Currently is the publisher, of course, communication is, and the public presentations. We are happy that colleagues from Estonia, they are first one. The second one will be Latvian colleagues, and we presented this handbook on 2nd of October this year. During the 9th, 10 speakers will present the context of the publication and problems of illegal trafficking. And of course, it will be a broadcast live through social media. And in conclusion, I would like to say that the published handbook will allow museums and author heritage protection professionals to have systematic information that will be available quickly when needed. And it will also be useful for new employees starting work in various heritage protection institutions. And the publication will encourage discussion about what needs to be changed in the existing legal system and what weaknesses and related to illegal trading of this we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Sigita. I know that we are the ones standing between you and the coffee break. But despite of that, I would like to give the floor to the audience for one short question, short answer. So whoever is the quickest to raise their hand, I will run towards you. And if not, I'm going to ask the question. So, okay, no question from the audience. Again, the same question as I asked from Krista. How do you see, what is the weakest link in this chain in protecting cultural heritage from illicit trafficking?
As I mentioned, now the biggest problem is online trade. Of course, it's hard to catch all these traders and buyers. Of course, it's a big problem. And of course, we have, like colleagues mentioned, this guys with metal detectors that they have hobbies. They are like, boys with big dreams to find the heart and to be discoveries. But it's in this time we have only one case. Just make an education for them, for all, that they are not just walking and taking nice time in the fields, but they are destroying the sites, and we are losing very important information because this activity. So I think these two problems that united us, like a states, is everywhere. But I hope we will find some solutions.
Thank you. So basically from your reply and Krista's reply, preparation and education basically are the key points that we still need to work on.
Thank you.
But now, thank you, Sigita, and applause.